Hey everyone, welcome to week number 78. Today is day 1, today is Monday. This is the beginning of a new week, which means a new theme. And the theme for this week is going to be finding your own style. We'll see how we do. Okay, let's get started. This is Monday. This is our first day. This is the beginning of a new week, which means new theme. The theme for this week is going to be finding your own style. And we're going to use urban landscapes as a way to try and find our own very distinct manner of painting. Now, this is very cool for me because if you know me, urban landscapes are my kryptonite. They are something that I can enjoy. I've certainly painted plein air, and I've been able to produce, I don't know, somewhat decent paintings. So I know that if I have to paint them, I can express myself as a painter through them. But when given the choice, it's something that I seemingly constantly avoid. So I thought to myself, why is it that I'm avoiding urban landscapes? Why is it that when given the choice to paint a human being or the places we inhabit, why do I always go for the human being? Why do I always go for the mirror? And obviously, it speaks about the connection that I have with painting human beings, with painting a reflection of humanity. And while I'm being honest with that connection, I also have to be sincere with myself and say that I don't really connect that much when I paint urban landscapes. And I convince myself that because there seems to be no exchange between that subject matter and myself, I end up just putting it to the side and saying, no, I'm better off by painting this particular thing that I just thoroughly enjoy, that I know that I enjoy, that I know that I can push. But throughout the weekend, I was thinking the only reason you don't know how to push urban landscape painting is because you don't do it enough. It's because you don't kind of force yourself to ask those tough questions, like what sort of relationship do I have with the interaction with the subject matter? And for this week, even though a week, let's say it now, a week is never going to be enough time to make discoveries. I think these 4 or 5 paintings are worthwhile because they are pushing me to ask those very questions. So instead of just naming this week urban landscapes, which would have been like the easiest thing to do, I thought we would go one step further and say, okay, we're going to paint urban landscapes, but the objective when painting these urban landscapes is to try and actually find a connection, to try and see what is it that you want to do, that you want to do. This is the most important part of that question. We always have to land on our path. We always have to redirect that question so that we are the central part of this, because if we are just going to paint like somebody we respect, if we are just going to echo some of the discoveries that other people have unearthed in their own path, then our path is worthless, to be honest. So when I say style, I'm trying to really dig in deep, and I'm not referring to anything that's superficial about style. I'm actually referring to like, how does that deep connection that you're forging manifest itself visually? Is there a concordance between this intent that you're discovering and the way you visually interpret these images, or there's still a chasm between those two? That's what I'm referring to when I say style. The last thing in my mind is just to try to paint in a very particular way, to try to make these images my own by just making a series of crazy choices and saying, hey, this is something that nobody else has done, so I can call it my own. This is so weird. I'm throwing everything at it, and it appears to be so distinct that that's going to be what I do from now on. No, I don't want to be gimmicky. I don't want to do something that's super technique-y, because those things are very superficial and those things will never last. Or even though if we grab onto them for as much as we can, they really don't have the strength to hold an image together for a long time. So I thought it was wonderful if for this week we could go on this journey together where I'm just trying to figure out where is it that I can form a relationship, a lasting relationship with urban landscapes, and see how that kinship could start to manifest itself through painted decisions. That's the objective, but that's so much easier said than done. What I just described could take a lifetime if you really think about it. That's usually the way art works. You can fry your brain trying to identify your objectives And then you realize that there is so much work ahead that it's going to take the rest of your life to try to find some answers. But that's very exciting. I mean, I know that a lot of people find that overwhelming because the path seems so vast in front of you that, as soon as you look at it and you see that it doesn't end, you could get discouraged right then and there. And you could say, you know what, this isn't for me. This is for somebody else to try and traverse. But I actually think that that's super interesting. Like I've always said, it just gives your life purpose. It gives your life an objective. Even if the objective is not readily or apparently available to you, it is telling you, hey, you're going to find things along this path as long as you're willing to walk through it. And that to me is super, super exciting. That sense of purpose in life, I think, is so important. It is so, so very important, especially when you're painting, because painting is filled with so much stumbling and so many struggles and so much frustration that it can be very reassuring to convince yourself that ultimately there is an objective, even if you do dozens of paintings where those goals are not represented. I know that that can be tough. I know that that can be painful, but those things also make up this path. The sooner that you accept that that's the character of that path that you're going to travel, then the easier it's going to be to withstand or to understand those missteps that we take along the way. So here is the first obstacle that's on my way. When I think of urban landscapes that I really, really enjoy, wonderful painters flood my mind. And when I was trying to just put them all on a blender and see what I can come up with, this is what I would want my work to look like, I come up with one name, and maybe it's a name that you guys don't know. I think you've heard me say before that my favorite urban landscape painter is uhgg. Schiele's work is incredible. When I look at his urban landscapes, they encompass so many of the things that move me sensibly. But the thing is, Schiele is so far away from what I can do, from the way I naturally express myself, that it would be weird if I forced myself to introduce some of that into my own work. I've referred to this before, but that's when I feel that we are forcing something into our own painting practice. Not everything that we enjoy, not every painting that we celebrate has to manifest itself through our own work. It doesn't work that way. You could be completely enamored. You could be enthralled by a painter's work, and they can have nothing to do with what you're doing. Absolutely nothing to do with what you're doing. And that's totally fine. Sometimes painters and sometimes observers are completely puzzled by these things where, you're asked, oh, what are some of your favorite painters? And you give them a list and none of them look like your own work. People think that that doesn't make sense. I think that that makes perfect sense. I've said this before, but liking more of the same has a limit. If every single painter that you list, they all say the exact same thing, and you are echoing that very thing through your own painting, oh my God, my blood sugar is going to go through the roof because it doesn't quite make sense. You're just pushing everything to one side of the balance that your own sensibility starts to become unbalanced. You start becoming this very binary being where if you look at things that look like your painting, then you like them, and anything that does not look like your painting, you completely disregard. And that's not the painter, that's not the artist, that's not the human being that I want to become. I'm always very wary of when I push towards one side of that balance and I'm risking that super important equilibrium that I want to exist in my own life. I always try to not even force myself. I think I do this very naturally, but I always try to look for other things that can teach me that perhaps go against those very same things that I hold dear. So to me, there has to be wonderful artists, wonderful people doing work that has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing. And I have to be open about receiving all those teachings and all the questioning that arises from the acknowledging and the reflecting upon those pieces of art. Because that's the way I can force myself to try and answer those tough questions and realize that maybe what I was building wasn't strong enough. So going back to urban landscapes, yes, the most intriguing, the most exciting artist for me is Egon Schiele. But then my mind goes to try and balance that and says, come on, there's one easy answer here, and it has to be Antonio Lopez. It just has to be. Lopez is an absolute genius, and that has to be your North Star. But then I tell myself, yeah, but Lopez seems so
far-fetched even. It just seems like even if I extend my reach, I don't think I would ever be able to understand the way he paints, to share his philosophy, because I've seen the degree of commitment with which he represents what he paints. The painting exclusively from life, the way he measures and checks all the information that he has in the painting from life. I respect so much the way he does that. But I just can't paint like that. That's just not part of who I am as a human being. Those things seem so far from my reach that in many ways they almost occupy the same space that uhgg does. I can show enormous respect for these two examples, but I'm never going to be able to put them into my own work because it seems like I'm forcing something that I know I can't produce just because I respect them wholeheartedly. So in my mind, I was like, okay, these two extremes, even though they're not at the opposite ends of the spectrum, but these two examples are just a little too far off for me. Where is that middle? Where is that middle point that is something that is hopefully accessible? And I'm not saying that the middle comes from just mixing in Antonio Lopez and uhgg and seeing what comes out. No. It doesn't have to be that way. But when I was thinking about this, only one artist pops into my brain. And again, there is tons of artists, and hopefully we're going to be able to mention some of them during this week, but there was one artist that I have this very visceral connection with, and he's an Italian artist. He's a wonderful painter, sculptor. I find him to have an amazing sensibility when he is constructing his works. His name is Velasco Vitali, and his landscapes are perfect for me. Absolutely perfect, because they are very aware of the latter half of the 20th century. So if we are trying to shorthand this, I would say he's kind of like Antonio Lopez meets Antonio Burri. A lot of Antonios in there. But I think that would be a really cool way to define what Velasco Vitali does. There's this Anselm Kiefer-esque expressiveness that is thrown into his paintings. They have a very sculptural feel. He does a lot with textures, with layering. But there's also this drawing sensibility where everything just feels off and it also feels perfectly right. I don't know how else to describe this, but when I see his paintings, they feel like an absolute chaos, tragic to a point, but they also feel perfectly aligned. So I get this push and pull from his work that I love when I look at painting and when I look at great art, that when I see his urban landscapes, I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. And we're coming to the part where this is tough, because saying those things, saying, Eureka, I found it, and then starting to believe that that person's work exemplifies everything you were looking for in this case, urban landscape painting, seems wonderful at first, and then you realize that it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Because if you found it, what's your job now? What are you supposed to do? Where do you enter in this equation? You can't just find something that you love and then say, the purpose of my life is to paint that thing I love from here on till the day I die. That doesn't make sense. That can't make sense. So this is one of the toughest things that we artists have to deal with, which is encountering a painter's work that encompasses everything, or at least we convince ourselves that it encompasses everything that we wanted to do with a work of art. That is very sticky. You know, that's a place where you're going to have a hard time getting out from, because everything about it seems perfect to us. Everything. If you've worked hard to try and understand what you like, and you finally see examples of somebody doing those very same things, like I struggled so much to try to answer this question, and I got to these results, and these results are beautifully exhibited in this person's work, then it feels like the equation is done. It feels like you reached the conclusion, and those paintings are the conclusion. So how do you get out of that? You know, it's almost impossible to get out of that. But the important thing is, and I guess this is the first step in trying to find how we would manifest in our own paintings, is to be aware, is to be painfully and consciously observant that you are in a place that seems wonderful, but it could be the beginning of a very, very, very tough road to get out of. And the first thing you have to do is not stop there. It seems like it's a conclusion. It seems like you found it, But you have to tell yourself, nope, nope, the road doesn't end here. This is actually a very nice view from this road. I'm walking down my path and I look to my left and oh my God, it's beautiful. You found this perfect scenario to paint. I could build a camp here, put that first stone down, and I could make this my home. I could build a civilization around this perfect view. But you have to tell yourself, no, when I turn away and look at my path, I realize that path keeps going to the horizon. So it's begging me, it's telling me, come on, you can stay here for a while and enjoy this beautiful view, but there's going to be a point where you have to keep on walking. Keep on walking doesn't mean that you forget about this beautiful view. No, what it's asking of you is to say, why did you stop and why did you find this beautiful? And I guess the reasons that I like Velasco Vitali's work is that the cities feel like they are the aftermath of some terrible natural tragedy, or they just feel like human beings have taken over, and the tragedy is the excess of humanity. I am drawn to these two different places where I feel they are this way because we've deemed them inhabitable, or they are this way because there is nobody there, because they are impossible to live in. With some of his paintings, like these aerial shots or where he's painting, looking down upon these cities, the cities feel asphyxiating. It almost feels like a human being would never be able to traverse those cities. It almost feels like you're supposed to stay at home and never go out because there would be no streets to walk by. There would be no streets to travel through. Those two quarreling sensibilities I find incredibly appealing. But then I tell myself, is that what I want? Is that what I want to paint? That humanity and chaos at the same time? I mean, do I force those things into my own painting? And how do they manifest themselves? Do I just look at his paintings superficially and say, okay, this feels like Antonio Burri or Manolo Valdés or Anselm Kiefer. So that clearly means that I have to start gluing textures and objects on top of my painting. Is that what that means? Do I have to interpret that one-to-one and say, technically I have to execute those paintings in that way? I don't think that that's what it means. I really don't. I think that, again, we go back to that question where even though those are the things that we recognize, that does not mean that those are the things that have to manifest in our own painting. They don't. So I do like the idea of thinking that there is life to something and also thinking that it is potentially lifeless. I really do. I think that that's something that's so hard to grasp that it just opens my mind. It broadens the way I see things, and it makes the act of painting super, super exciting. Like that to me is far more exciting than saying, oh, I have to understand where my vanishing point is. Even though when I look at Antonio Lopez's work, he has made those efforts to try and understand where his vanishing points are, where his horizon line is, and he's being incredibly respectful of those things when he paints. Yes, some of the paintings that I love have to do with somebody being incredibly faithful to natural perspective. I totally get it. But when I want to do my painting, those things don't seem attractive to me. What we are starting to understand is that I don't like to follow this naturalist law in my own painting. I don't want to be burdened by that. But I also don't want it to feel like because I'm not following that, I am just going to haphazardly paint this and then easily justify it as an expressive decision. No, I want those decisions to be also mindful of the fact that I'm trying to get character out of what I'm painting. And that's super, super tough because I have to start seeing urban landscape painting in exactly the same way I see my figurative work, where I just connect instantly. That coldness that I usually associate with depicting a bunch of buildings or a bunch of facades, I have to start embracing the fact that they have personality. And it can be an incredibly complex personality like us human beings have. So that was it for today. That was the start. We're going to see how we can progress through this a little bit more. It sounds super exciting to me. Now that I'm trying to voice all these questions that I had in my mind, it seems super cool. Am I going to be able to reach a painting during this week that encompasses all the things that I'm going to talk about? Oh, no, for sure not. I mean, we have to really, really lower our expectations here. But it's a start. The most beautiful thing is that we have decided to start. And when we begin on these endeavors, we have to be conscious that there are not going to be beautiful answers at the beginning of this road. Maybe there are. Maybe we're super, super lucky. But usually what happens is that we are lucky, but we are unable to understand why something that we did works. And the idea behind this is to start to form a lasting relationship. And for that to happen, we have to understand the why behind our paintings. So like I said, that's going to be it for today. Join us tomorrow, Spanish Tuesdays. Brush up on your Spanish. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.